Hey everybody, I'm Joe with Archery Northwest, and I'm here with Adam George, and he is going to talk to us about something that he's just created. It's been on the market a few different times, but there's not been anyone that's made it quite like he has, that's as simple as it is and works as effective as it has. So tell us what it is.
So yeah, this is going to be George's Gizmo's third axis gizmo, and it is going to simplify the way archers set up their third axis tool or third axis on their sight.
So if you're familiar with shooting competition, you know when you start going outside that you're going to end up shooting up and down hills. Yep. And so a lot of times when you're shooting indoors for that indoor season, you just really focus on your second axis being right and making sure, but it doesn't even have to be right as long as you're sighting in, since you're standing on a known distance. When you go outside, you need your first, second, and third axis done. Your third axis is all done on angle. Well, you'll see through this video as we talk about this, if the bow is on angle 45 degrees up or down, that bubble should stay in the center. But if the third axis is off, it'll be incorrect. The bubble will float to one side than the other.
Yep.
So, but there's something else that happens. When you're at full draw, you create a different line of torque.
Yeah, your hand, like the hand pressure on the grip will induce torque in the bow. No matter what hand shape or shooter you are, everybody induces some type of torque into the bow. It's just the nature of archery.
Mm-hmm. And we'll show you this too, with the cables being pulled off to the side from the cable, the roller guards in this case, there's a certain amount of mechanical torque that's built into the bow. When the bow goes to full draw, the cables come under more tensile strength, so that load increases, so the mechanical torque increases on the bow along with your grip. That's why when you're running a V-bar, you end up having to move it in or out until you are happy with the balance of the bow, so that you're using the least amount of muscles to keep the bow from moving.
Yep.
So with all those things in mind, you still have to get the third axis under load, meaning at full draw, set. And this tool is probably the most simple that I've seen. It's probably the it's very well thought out, and it's very simple to install to get your third axis in a hotel room or on the range prior to a shoot, or if something goes wrong during a shoot, you could literally put this in your quiver because it's really small and compact, and you could fix it on the go at a tournament. So if you drop your bow or you realize it's off, you can make those changes. So let's talk about how you put it on there.
Here we have the third axis gizmo. You'll receive 2 rubber bands, an elastic cord that's pre-attached, the bubble alignment tool, which just slips onto place, and on the back side, it'll come with a total of 8 plastic alignment screws, which are easily removable depending on what you need for your size of scope. And the wings here, they move in and out to adjust for a variety of different size scopes. Here we have this 25 millimeter scope, and for this size scope, I'm going to go ahead and take off these outside alignment screws. And this will allow me on this size scope to use these inside alignment screws on the inside of the scope. And then I'll set it in place, expand the wings, and now it is centered inside the scope.
All right, so this is my Title 38. I'm gonna prep it so that he can install this. So most people run a light anymore. If you don't, then it's not gonna be in play. But I do something weird too. I put this scope cover for a rifle on here and put a little screw in the back so it flips out and becomes a 90-degree blinder for me, so I don't have to wear one on my hat. And it just helps me focus a little more. So because of that, I'm just gonna show you how easy this tool still sets up on this, and most scopes don't have this in the way. So the first thing we'll do is we want to take off the light, and you don't need the light for the rest of the time until you're finished. This is a 25 millimeter, it's an AV25, so they just stopped making this for 2024. So if you still have one, it'll still work on this. This is about as small of a scope as you'll find, and when I put this ring on here, that probably drops it down to around a 21, maybe a 22 millimeter. But this device is made to work from the outside of the scope to clip on it, or from the inside of the scope.
That is correct. Yep.
And so let's go ahead and install it there, and then show how to set it up.
So first, you'll want to, of course, make sure that you have a good, durable rubber band, and you'll want to slide it up over the scope. And then you'll have the third axis tool, and when you get all the screws set up in place, you'll put it on the scope, expand it to fit your scope. On this case, I'm doing it to the inside because of all the features that he has on his current scope. We'll take the rubber band, hook it onto the peg on the inside, pull the rubber band out, twist it, so that way it creates an X on the other side of the scope, and you'll pull it around and then hook it on to the other band. And I recommend having the rubber bands on the outside. That way it helps reduce the amount of twisting, like unnecessary twisting of the tool. On the third axis gizmo, we can orient it multiple different ways. So right now we have the bubble on top. We can have the bubble down at the bottom. And I find that if I align the bubble on the third axis gizmo with the scope's bubble, it's easier to see both of them. And then when you attach the elastic cord to the string, if the bubble is on top of the third axis gizmo, then I recommend tying the elastic cord below your peep sight. If it is, the bubble is at the bottom of the third axis gizmo, then I recommend tying the elastic cord above your peep sight. Right here we have the bubble of the third axis gizmo on the bottom side, which in this case, the scope's bubble is on the bottom of the scope. So we have it matching. It ultimately, from my experience, makes it easier to see both bubbles when we get to later steps of the process. So I went ahead and took the elastic cord and tied it above the peep sight. That way it gets the elastic cord above the bubbles and does not interfere with your line of sight. Here we have the bubble alignment tool, and we want to, I find that it's easier to always have this tool on top or opposite of the bubble. That way you can see if your bubble's on top of the scope, then the tool doesn't get in the way. In this case, the bubble's on the bottom, so I'm going to use the bubble alignment tool and install it on top. And this keeps the bubble from pivoting side to side and perpendicular with the scope for initial setup. And I want to introduce more slack into the line to ensure that I don't overdraw the elastic cord. And so now we have what I would consider a sufficient amount of slack in the line. And now we're ready for the next step. Now that we have the third axis gizmo aligned with the scope's bubble, we're ready to take the lock off as we just did. And now we're ready to put an arrow on the bow and have a safe area that we can draw the bow back just in case anything happens. And from here, we will align the third axis gizmo with the scope's gizmo on flat, or aimed flat, and make sure they both align. And then if they do, we can go ahead and point the bow down or up, in this case down. And we'll focus on the third axis gizmo. We'll level that out. Once that is level, we'll look at the scope's level. If it is off, then that means we need to adjust the scope's third axis. Now that we checked the aiming down with the third axis gizmo and the sight, we made some adjustments. So let's go ahead and aim upwards and verify that the aiming up third axis is good. So we'll level the third axis gizmo and check where the scope's level is at. If the scope is off, we'll need to make further adjustments. If it is correct, then we are good to go.
All right, so there you have it. It's pretty simple to use. It's going to be really effective when you're out side shooting, and you need to get that third axis just as perfect as you can under your torque. And the last question is I know everybody always wants to know, why is this important? Why did you come up with this particular design?
So I came up with this. I've used different products in the past, and none of them really worked as very easily, or you would look at it and you would have to torque the bow differently to be able to line it up with a plumb string or something like that. And this one here, the third axis Gizmo, you don't have to worry about any plumb line or anything like that, aligning two pins. You put it on the scope, you get to full draw, you aim up and down, and you look at two bubbles and make sure that they align together.
Yep, that's what I like about it too. I've had another one with pins that I liked a lot because there was nothing else out there to begin with, but it screwed onto the sight, and then it ended up, over wear and tear, it would just be harder, or if you dropped it, the pin would bend. And I ran into that before, because I'm, clumsy and I dropped it. This one is pretty much going to stay self-centered because of it's inside of the scope. Right. And it's inside of the circle that was already machined as a complete circle. Yep. So it's going to be a lot easier to keep everything the way you want. So where can they reach out to find you?
Currently on Facebook at George's Gizmos, and also on Instagram at George's Gizmos.
And we are going to start carrying them in the shop. We'll hopefully have some. He's got to make just a couple of small little modifications and changes, but we'll have this as we start to hit the road with the mobile shop, and we're going to start stocking them in the shop as well, because it's something that every outdoor archer is going to want.